Do you want to become a genius trader? Do you want to learn the secrets of beating the stock market consistently year after year? Well, if the answer to that question is yes, look no further because I have the answer. Become a politician and join the United States Senate or the House of Representatives. Because yet again, 2021 falls in line with a long list of years in which members of Congress beat the stock market. So how do they do it? Well, it's a very well kept secret. And in fact, it's an investing method that very, very few people in this country ever participate in. And the reason is because it is illegal for everybody except Congress. That secret investing method is called insider trading. Ready? Let's dive in. Take a look with me at this report from unusualwhales.com about the year in review for 2021 congressional trading that took place in 2021. We are going to skim through this. We're not going to look at it all. I'll be sending this article out in my weekly newsletter on Friday. If you'd like to sign up, link is in the description below. And this article, man, we're going to go through a bunch of charts that show all of the ways that Congress really took advantage of their ability to make laws that influence the behavior of markets and individual securities. And we're going to see how they were able to profit off of that. So first, let's take a look at the summary. Number one, hundreds of millions of dollars of individuals in Congress, their own money, were traded on the stock market just in 2021. For stocks, it was about $290 million. And guess what? Shocker, they beat the market. So first, let's take a look at this chart to see what exactly it is that most members of Congress are trading. We can see that members in the House really like to trade options a lot. And then members of the Senate really like to trade other securities. And then members of the House also like to trade stocks. Those were the big players here. There's a little bit going on elsewhere, but those were the big players. Now, here's how 2021 compared to 2020. We can see asset-backed securities went up a little, corporate securities went down a little, government securities agency and debt went down a little, other securities went up a little bit, options exploded higher, massive increase in the amount of options being traded, and then there was a decrease in stocks. But one thing that's important to know is that in 2020, there were two senators, Perdue and Loeffler, who traded about $200 million worth of stocks in 2020. And so without those two senators, if you just take out their trades, the stock trading in Congress was just about the same in 2021 as it was in 2020, minus those two giant whales. So when do they do most of their trading? Well, we can see that the House was pretty evenly distributed, trading a lot more during the first part of the year, and August was a big one, and then the Senate was concentrated January, March, and July, but overall still fairly well distributed throughout the year. So the question is this a bad thing? Because the fact just inherently that members of Congress are actively trading stocks and options doesn't necessarily mean that there is any foul play going on, although I will we're going to look at a pretty good case here through the rest of this video that there is foul play, but just that inherently, just alone by itself, doesn't mean anything bad. So what we have to do is, okay, well, what are their returns? Because if they're trading a ton and they're just losing a ton of money, then fine, they're idiots, whatever, they're just losing money. So let's look at their average returns. On average, Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives had a return of 14.7%. And Senate Democrats were at 15.4%, Senate Republicans just under 13%. Now, to compare it to the market, SPY returns were 13.6%. That means that House Democrats and Republicans and Senate Democrats all beat the market, while Senate Republicans slightly underperformed the market, which means altogether, on average, Congress beat the market. So how did they do it? Well, number one, it wasn't everybody. So this is the first thing we have to look at. This is a chart of the members of Congress that beat the market in 2021. There are a couple that massively outperformed: Austin Scott, Brian Mast, French Hill, and on and on and on and on down it goes until we get all the way to the bottom where we see here is the market right down here. So Everybody here that you see on this list, this shows how much they beat the market by relatively. Now again, even that, it's looking more fishy, but it doesn't seal the deal that there's any foul play going on. So they could just be smart, and it could have nothing to do with what they are doing for their day job. They could just be very good at analyzing stocks and looking at charts and picking stocks that are going to be doing well. So to see if there's any foul play going on, let's take a look to see if there is any correlation between the stocks that were chosen when they were bought and sold versus what's going on Capitol Hill. Number one, let's take a look. House Republican Brian Mast's Tilray purchase. So when did he buy Tilray? He bought Tilray in 2020 before voting in support of the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment Act in late 2020. And then he sold it at all-time highs in early 2021 for returns of 563%. So he bought it, voted in favor of an act that would help the company, and then sold it a few months later. Next, Lockheed Martin won a $10 billion contract to modernize the F-22s. Kevin Hearn bought Lockheed Martin back in August. He bought another round up to $100,000 in just 2 weeks before the news broke. So buying based on insider information that a company was going to do well because they won a large contract from the government, which the government votes for and decides who gets that money. All right, moving on. House Democrat Kathy Manning sits on the House Committee for Foreign Affairs, bought $30,000 in Lockheed Martin on October 22nd, again, just 2 weeks before this news broke. Moving on, the U.S. Army announced a $22 billion augmented reality deal with Microsoft on March 31st of 2021 and reiterated its commitment to this partnership in October. And Speaker Nancy Pelosi disclosed exercising 150 calls, which if you don't know what calls are, they're basically a leveraged bet. If you buy a call, that's a bet that the stock is going to go up. Disclosed exercising 150 calls on March 19th, 2021, 11 days before this deal with Microsoft went into effect at a strike price of $130. And as of this report, she's up 160% on that position. Moving on, there was a $10 billion contract between Microsoft that was canceled. It's called the Jedi contract. And look at this. Just a few weeks earlier, Senate Republican Tuberville sold up to $15,000 in Microsoft stocks in late June. Again, just 2 weeks before this massive $10 billion contract was canceled. Was it luck? Well, maybe, but he sat on the Senate Armed Services Committee privy to these defense contracts, so likely he knew about it. Moving on, House Republican Pat Fallon, who sits on the House subcommittee responsible for reviewing these contracts, sold up to $250,000 in Microsoft, again, right before this Jedi contract was canceled. Now, this goes on and on and on and on, but the question is, number one, I thought insider trading was illegal, right? Well, it turns out for Congress, it's not. For a long time, it was perfectly legal for members of Congress to do any sort of insider trading that they wanted. Back in 2012, the Stock Act was passed, which was the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. Obama signed it into law in 2012, and that was supposed to stop members of Congress from being able to, again, just like it says, be able to trade on insider information. If you are in charge, if you are in a position of power to make laws and decide on contracts where massive amounts of government money are going to be allocated and which companies are going to get those contracts, what things are going to be able to be legal or illegal, then it makes sense that if you are that person, you'll be able to buy and sell stocks that are going to be getting preferential treatment or losing preferential treatment and make a ton of money on that. There's a conflict of interest there, to say the least. So they made it illegal. And then 1 year later, this article is from NPR in April 2013. 1 year later, this bill was quietly overturned, reversing big pieces of the law that essentially render it neutered and useless, which gets us to the point where you have all of these members of Congress being able to, again, buy and sell stocks based off of information that they know ahead of time, ahead of the public, where they are able to profit off of the very laws laws and contracts that they are deciding on. Not only that, the disclosures are all out of whack. They are supposed to have to report these trades within 45 days of making the trades, which that alone, it's like, okay, let's say fine. Let's say the only thing we change is that they have to report it. Why would there be a 45-day window? It should at the very least be live, or even better, they should have to get prior approval, like the Federal Reserve is passing their internal rules that if you want to make trades, you have to get approval for the trades ahead of time. And so Congress is just ridiculous. They have 45 days to disclose the trades that they made, and then if just, for whatever reason, they require more time, they have 90 days from the transaction date. They have to file an extension. So what happens if you don't? If you get it in late? Oh, look at that. Subject to a $200 penalty. A $200 penalty when they're making a lot more money than that on the trades that they're placing. That is not a big deal, to say the least, to have to pay $200 as a late filing penalty. Now, here's the deal. If there is anybody in this country that should be allowed to make trades on insider information, it would be regular people, right? And if there were anybody in this country that should not be allowed to make trades on inside information, it should be the people who are responsible for making the prices of those assets move up or down, because they are using not their own money but taxpayers' money to award contracts to these massive companies, and they know about it ahead of time, and they are voting for it to happen or not to happen, whether the contracts get awarded or pulled away and given to somebody else, or laws that are passed so that some companies will benefit and some will not. If anybody should be not allowed to trade on that information, it should be Congress. If there is anybody who should have to put all of their assets in a blind trust with zero control over, it would be Congress. At the very least, eliminate that conflict of interest where they are using taxpayer funds to award contracts, make decisions, and then they're profiting off of it by trading in it in advance of the public knowing of that information. It's just absolutely preposterous. It is rules for thee, but not for me. And it is stuff like this. This is blatant, outright corruption that not causes the downfall of great empires, but is the sign that the empire is falling. And the final nail in the coffin, just the kicker here, the cherry on top, is the response from Nancy Pelosi. She was questioned by a reporter about this because her portfolio has gained notoriety. Like, people follow it. They make the Pelosi ETF and they follow her trade, saying she's the best trader in the world, right? And so people question her about this. She was questioned by a reporter and said, hey, given the fact that there's all this publicity about this and people are realizing that members of Congress are trading on information, do you think that we should restrict members of Congress from being able to trade individual securities? Look at what she said.
Finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that, and secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock, on the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
She said, no, it's a free market. Must be nice, Nancy. Rules for thee, but not for me. I've got this article linked in the description below, just in case you want to look at the full report. There are plenty of other charts that we didn't cover in this video. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.